Why you have to make all these excuses for her? This, like I said, all this was this week was people who said, "Oh, she ran a flawless campaign. How ridiculous!" Or it's sexism, it's racism. This is an old playbook.
Yes, I didn't say any of those things.
I know, but I've heard a lot of these things, and like I think America's perfectly willing to elect a woman. They just didn't like the last two that were put up.
All right, buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into one of the most ridiculous blame games politics has served up in years, and trust me, the competition is stacked. We're talking about the media's total meltdown after Kamala Harris's crushing defeat to Donald Trump. But more specifically, we're zeroing in on MSNBC, where the excuse machine has been running hotter than a Vegas slot machine. That'd be why now. You'd think they would have moved on. At the very least, you'd expect them to swap out the tired, worn-out it's sexism, it's racism carved for something new, something halfway creative. But nope. Same playbook, same recycle lines, just drag out cloth.
But you're either the person who's Googling the day before, did Biden drop out, or you know in a week. You know, did anyone in this audience not know enough about Kamala Harris pretty much after a week to make a decision?
Polished up and shoved back into rotation. It's stale, it's predictable, and it's not fooling anyone anymore. And that's exactly where Bill Maher came in, swinging a sledgehammer straight through the pity parade. No sugarcoating, no fake sympathy, no polite nodding just to keep the crowd happy. Instead, he dropped brutal honesty like a wrecking ball. And honestly, I'm here for it. Because when even a lifelong liberal like Maher pulls a plug on the spin cycle, you know the narrative is officially collapsing as let's rewind for...
It's sexism, it's racism. This is an old playbook.
Yes, I didn't say any of those things.
I know, but I've heard a lot of these things. And like, I think America's perfectly willing to elect a woman. They just didn't like the last two that were put up.
Second, all week long, the pundits have been out there on TV, pounding the desk, insisting that Harris's campaign was flawless. Flawless? Come on. That's like saying New Coke was a flawless product launch. Or that cat's the cinematic fever dream that traumatized an entire generation was flawless filmmaking. Nobody bought it then, and nobody's buying it now. Let's be honest, this wasn't flawless. This wasn't even in the neighborhood of flawless. And when that shiny little talking point started to collapse under the weight of reality, out came the backup excuses, like clockwork. The usual...
But the Vice President of the United States is basically shoved in a broom closet for 3.5 years.
I know.
Like, you couldn't...
She was more popular in there.
Yes, well...
I mean, this idea that the idea in a mass media age that 107 days is not long enough to know somebody.
You are way overestimating the American people in terms of what they.
No.
You have someone like Donald Trump has become a universally known, understood, loved by some, hated by others over the course of being omnipresent for 8 years.
Suspects lined up on cue: sexism, racism, voter ignorance. Same script, different year. It's the political version of lather, rinse, repeat. No creativity, no accountability, just the same tired record, skipping the exact same spot. But here's where the spin completely falls apart. America is perfectly capable of electing a woman. That's not up for debate. The problem isn't the voters. The problem is the candidates they keep shoving at us. Time and time again, the party trots out the wrong women, and then acts shocked when voters don't swoon. That's not misogyny. That's just people refusing to be impressed. And last I checked, that's still allowed. That's not misogyny. That's just called not being impressed. And guess what? That's allowed. Not every rejection is some grand act of oppression. Sometimes people just don't like the product you're selling. Period. No conspiracy. No invisible boogeyman. Just a collective, nah, we're good.
All right, do the Democrats need a social media platform, this is for you, John, of their own to combat the Republican influence on Twitter? Well, I don't know, but Twitter, it's funny, it used to be completely left. Then Elon said, I'm gonna take it over, so it's gonna be 50-50 right down the middle. He didn't do that. It just switched completely. So I don't know. It's terrible that I think that we have our own media silos. We need places where, like this show, but there's not enough of them, where everybody comes and everybody hears everybody else from all points of view.
Now here's where it really gets spicy. Bill Maher points out that Kamala Harris spent 3.5 years shoved into what can only be described as a political broom closet. She was so invisible, it's almost like her approval rating went up out of sheer absence. Out of sight, out of mind, literally. The less people saw of her, the less they remembered why they didn't like her. And then, boom, suddenly, with only 107 days left before the election, she's thrust under the spotlight as the new face of the Democratic ticket. Talk about a hard sell. It was political speed dating with the entire country. And spoiler alert, the chemistry wasn't there. Some pundits tried to spin it, saying, well, America just didn't have enough time to really get to know her. Please, this isn't the 1800s where news travels by horseback. America had plenty of time. They knew her. They just weren't buying what she was selling. No amount of last-minute marketing changes that. Oh, please. This isn't the 1800s. We live in an era where Donald Trump managed to dominate the national conversation for 8 straight years, half the time without even lifting a finger. You think Americans need a full decade to form an opinion on someone? They didn't need that for Trump. They didn't need that for Obama. And they sure as hell didn't need it for Kamala. The country had already made up its mind. But here's the uncomfortable truth MSNBC refuses to touch. People already knew her. They just didn't like her. Period. End of story. And instead of owning that reality, the media ran interference. They dressed it up as some tragic case of not enough time, when really, voters weren't confused. They were unimpressed. Big difference. Now let's talk about the media silos Maher brought up, because this is where things get really telling. He's dead on. Sure, the right has its own echo chambers today, but the entire concept of building political safe spaces didn't start on the right. It was born the second the left locked down legacy media, CNN, MSNBC, NPR, and turned it into a political shield. And what did that shield look like? Simple. Bad stories about Democrats, spiked before they ever saw daylight. Embarrassing moments, magically edited out. Opponents, painted as cartoon villains, replayed on a 24/7 loop. For years, Trump wasn't just covered. He was treated like the punching bag in every single news cycle. Meanwhile, Democrats got the deluxe package. The soft lighting, the gentle piano music, and interview questions that sounded like they were lifted straight out of Hallmark script. That's not journalism. That's public relations. And here's the kicker. People noticed. They caught on. And once trust is gone, you don't get it back with more PR fluff. That's why millions of people ditched the networks and tuned into independent voices instead. Podcasters like Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, Patrick Bet-David. Raw, unfiltered, not hiding behind fake objectivity. They didn't pretend to be neutral, but at least they weren't running stories through a partisan fob machine. Messy? Sure, but it was honest. And that honesty felt like fresh air. And the results? Wild. Those podcasts and YouTube channels ended up shaping the election conversation more than ABC, NBC, CNN, and MSNBC combined. Think about that. The left controlled everything. Networks, op-eds, Twitter before Elon, the headlines, late-night hosts, even the fact-checkers. Yet they still got outmaneuvered by a bunch of guys recording in garages with a mic and a camera. That's not just ironic. That's embarrassing. Here's the kicker. The second people started pointing to those alternative platforms, the same media elites who once worshipped Twitter suddenly declared it not real life. Convenient, right? Twitter was real enough when it banned the Hunter Biden story and throttled conservative accounts. But the second Elon Musk unlocked the doors, suddenly it's a toxic cesspool. That's not analysis. That's sore loser syndrome, and you can see it in the language. The moment bias gets brought up, pundits start squirming. They wrap half-truths and euphemisms, tiptoe around reality, and talk like they're barefoot walking across Lego pieces. Pain written all over their faces, but determined not to admit the obvious. The media's credibility collapsed, and America noticed. Then came the economy excuse. This one was rich. John Heilman actually went on TV and said voters' frustration was mostly perception. As in, people didn't really have it that bad. They just thought they did. Really? Tell that to families whose grocery bills doubled. To small business owners suffocating under rent hikes. To anyone filling their gas tank since Biden took office, that wasn't perception. That was reality hitting. People straight in the wallet. Gas prices through the roof. Mortgage rates over 7%. Wages flat while food, energy, and housing kept climbing. You didn't need a pollster to explain it. You just needed to open your fridge and see what wasn't there. Yet pundits insisted voters were confused. As if Americans can't tell the difference between inflation on paper and inflation in real life. And then came the insult. Heilman suggested 107 days wasn't enough time for America to get to know Kamala Harris. Translation: you're too dumb to figure things out quickly. Wrong. Americans didn't reject Kamala because they didn't know her. They rejected her because they did. The awkward cackles, the word salads, the inability to land a clear point. Most people made up their minds in the first week. Maher nailed it. Other countries run elections in weeks. They don't need years of campaign theater to size up a candidate, and neither do we. The only people who want endless town halls and stage interviews are the consultants billing by the hour. Voters? They already knew Kamala. They just didn't like what they saw. Period. Which brings us to the final excuse, the mythical late deciders. Heilman compared them to Christmas Eve shoppers, wandering aisles at the last minute. But here's the thing, last-minute voters aren't clueless. They're cautious. They wait for the closing pitch. And Kamala's closing pitch? It flopped. Not because she ran out of time. Because she had nothing to say so here we are, right back at the beginning. The media can spin it however they want. Flawless campaign, unfair sexism, bad timing, late deciders. But the bottom line is brutally simple. Voters saw Kamala Harris, heard her message, and decided she wasn't it. That's not misogyny. That's not ignorance. That's democracy. And until Democrats stop blaming voters and start listening to them, they're going to keep losing and keep blaming on everyone but themselves. So here's the question. Was this really about timing, or are Democrats just allergic to accountability? Drop your thoughts below, smash that like button if you're tired of political excuses, and subscribe. Because next time, we're diving into why the media is more terrified of losing control of the narrative than they are of losing elections. And trust me, that's where it gets messy.